Lots of talk about Denis Suarez potentially being on his way to Arsenal. Are they looking at the right places?
I think with Denis Suarez, I think when you look at the connection he played with Emery at Sevilla, he's very flexible in terms of the position. He can play on both wings, he can play central midfield. They score goals, there's no doubt about that, but I think it's the same old story. It's the defensive side of the team that is the issue. I think they've had 1 clean sheet in the last 15 games. Obviously, they've had unfortunate injuries to players at the back. And I just think Emery's probably looking and thinking, right, OK, if it's only going to be loans that we can bring in, can it be somebody that I know? Can it be somebody that knows the way I want to play? Yeah, which makes sense. I think the unfortunate thing from Arsenal's perspective is that if he's saying it has to be loans. My honest opinion, I think, don't get me wrong, there's been some unbelievable signings from the top clubs in January, but more often than not, it's the lesser clubs, the team fighting down at the bottom that get the successful deals in January. The majority of the big clubs, their best deals are in the summer. I know, obviously, the likes of Van Dijk and Vidic and Evra and people like that, but the majority of the times, the big business and the good business done by the big clubs is in the summer, because more often than not in January it's very difficult to bring a player in that's going to make your starting 11 better if you're a top 4 or top 6 team rather than the team at the bottom.
It's the worst time in the world to ever try and buy anybody, you know? And because of the rules, you're rushing out to get some bread and everybody's trying to buy bread. There's no good deals whatsoever, right? So what surprises me about Arsenal, and it has for a couple of years really, that they let the contracts run down. They have lost millions of pounds by not planning to sell somebody who might not want to be there, who might have done their time there, and let them go for nothing. That's what is crazy about it. And the balance of Lacazette and Aubameyang, do they need 2 wingers that are completely sensational, or 2 fullbacks who are completely sensational to pin teams back, to allow those 2 to play the way they play? One's off the shoulder, the other. I think Lacazette is a genius. Wonderful touches, links. I love watching him. But the balance isn't there. And what are they going to do with Ozil? You know, who's their highest player? So
he's a player that Arsene Wenger, when you talk about doing the right kind of business and not letting contracts run out, he's a player who did get a new contract because Arsene Wenger said it made more sense to pay him the wages that he wanted than to go out and try and replace him, which would have cost more money. Yeah,
Arsenal, I felt he always tried to do it the right way for the club, you know, financially and everything. You know, some of the things he did was amazing, you know, absolutely. Nicolas Anelka, 500,000, sold him for 23.5 million, sorry, you know. 500,000, 23.5 million, 18 months later. It's amazing what he's done for that football club. But he loved talent almost too much in the end, I feel, you know, because really the Germans used Ozil to just go and play and go and float. And oh, he was sensational for a large period of time. But the balance around him isn't really there, I feel, you know. So let him go. If that's the way, if he wants to go, let him go. And then, but you have to reinvest. Now's not the right time. So, you know, where are they going to go with it? Is he going to have enough money to bring in a signing? That's why he's talking about loans. And what financially are Arsenal doing? Because for quite a few years, I believe, since David Dein isn't there, it didn't run how it should have done to be the club that is that size. It wasn't smooth enough. They were always playing catch-up with some of these stars, do you know what I mean? And maybe they said it because they weren't winning anything, but, you know, they got a couple of cups. It wasn't really that. It was almost too beautiful. Instead of where's the heart, like the little one. Is it Torreira now? Oh, wonderful. They've needed someone like that since Patrick Vieira, haven't they, really? You know, just to... So it's that balance with them, and I'm worried for Emery because I think he's done brilliantly, but I don't know what resources he's actually going to have to keep them where they should be or where they have been in our sort of top 4, top 5-ish.
And the one thing that Emery wants is consistency, which is what he's asked for from Ozil. He hasn't started the last 4 games, but he has been recovering from a knee injury. Emery said that Ozil, in the game against West Ham, wasn't 100% to start that game. But if you're not going to use him, Do you need to think? I mean, Emery says he's not thinking about Ozil leaving the club, but does he need to think about Ozil leaving the club if he's not going to use him, if he's not going to get that consistency?
I think he does. The problem that you have is obviously the highest paid player at the football club. Who's going to take him? Would Arsenal have to subsidise some of the wages? How much is he going to cost? I think the biggest problem for Ozil, and we saw it with Emery at Sevilla, is that in possession, Ozil is a perfect player for Emery. There's no doubt about that. It's out of possession. Because we know how Arsenal play. When they lose that ball, we had all the stats out and everything at the start of the season, the amount of distance that they cover. They will press with a 5. If one of them 5 doesn't press, that chain gets broken. And I think the lack of trust probably from Emery with Ozil is out of possession. It's not in possession. We know he's a wonderful player in possession. But does he become a player that you end up carrying out of possession? That's something that Emery will not allow. And we've seen that in the previous teams that he's been at, in particular Sevilla. And that could be the key difference as to why he's not playing as well.
How can you set up a high-pressing team with him in it?
That's what I'm saying. That's the problem.
How can you do that?
So you can have a talented player who doesn't necessarily fit what the manager is trying to do.
Yeah, well,
unless he adapts.
If you look at De Bruyne, he doesn't press like everybody else, but normally Man City's possession is so dominant that you can get away with that. And his brilliance when he's in that final little bit, I'll get you to the 18-yard box and you lot will be brilliant. That's what he says to him. You know, you can get away with him, but I don't see Arsenal being able to dominate that much. I think to do that.
I think one of the big things is as well, I think the comparison with Manchester City and Arsenal don't have a Fernandinho, arguably one of the best defensive midfielders in the world, so you can have that to a certain extent.